Hello grade 11s, here's the video for section 6.3, which is now adding and subtracting. Now adding subtracting fractions is more difficult than multiplying and dividing. That's because you have two cases. Case 1 is where the denominators are the same. Now this is the easy case, because when the denominators are the same, then you can just add the numerators and simplify your fraction. So again, the 1 plus the 5 is the 6 and gives me a reduced fraction of 3/4. But if the denominators are different, you have to get a common denominator before you can add and subtract them, like in case 1. So here we have 5/6 minus 3/8. So we need to multiply the top and the bottom by a number to get them both to something common. So here the common denominator would be 24, because that is the lowest common multiple that they each go into. So again, multiply them out. 5/6 becomes 20/24, and 3/8 becomes 9/24, and then you can subtract the numerators to get 11/24. So remember also that when you multiply the bottom, you have to also multiply the top. So this gets tricky in our next question when we get into polynomial fractions or rationals. So let's try A here together. Notice that all of these have common denominators already, so all we have to do is add or subtract the numerators. So be careful though here, because when I go to subtract A minus 1 from 2A, it's a good idea to put the A minus 1 in brackets to show that that subtracting is actually happening to both of those pieces in the second rational. So this becomes 2A minus A plus 1 over B, and then 2A minus 1A is just going to be 1A plus 1 divided by B. So that again would be the simplest form. And as always, we have to look at the non-permissible values. So in this case, we have a B that can't equal 0 in the denominator. Let's look at the next one. For part B, again, common denominator, so I just have to add the 2x plus the 8 together, and that's over top of x plus 4. But this one, there's a little bit of simplifying that can be done. So I notice I would divide out a 2. So when I divide out a 2, I'm left with x plus 4, and again, an x plus 4 in the denominator. Note my non-permissible value here is that x cannot equal -4. But then those x plus 4s can be divided out. So my simplified answer is just 2, or 2 over 1, since when you divide something by itself, you're left with 1. Okay, so that would be your examples when you have common denominators. Now let's look at one where we don't have common denominators. So let's look at A. We want to simplify these. So here I have 2x divided by xy plus 4 over x squared minus 3. And note it already tells us our non-permissible values are that x can't equal 0 and y can't equal 0. So we don't need those in this question. So when I need a common denominator, I have to get them all to the same amount. So I see that we have an x squared and an xy, and the 3 would just have a 1 underneath. So common, in this case, would be x squared y, because everything needs to be included for this denominator. So that's our common denominator. That means I need to multiply this first part by an extra x to get the bottom to have x squared. I need to multiply the second part by a y to get it to be x squared y, and I need to multiply this last part by x squared and y, or the whole thing. And again, we always do the top and the bottom, so you're not actually changing the equation. So then my numerator for the first section is 2x squared, the second part is 4y, and the back part is minus 3x squared y, and that's now going to be over the common denominator of x squared y. There is nothing here that can be simplified, so this would be your final answer. Let's try the next one. Now, often when you have polynomials, it's easiest to factor it first so that you can tell what the common denominator is. So here in the top, we have y squared minus 20, and the denominator, when I factor it, I get y minus 2 and y plus 2, because at bottom there is a difference of squares. And then my other side here is already factored, so y minus 2 over y plus 2. Notice I did not factor the numerator over here because I know I'm going to add these things together anyways, so it helps if they are still written in that form since I'm going to add things together. But now when I look here, I see that I'm missing an x minus 2 from this denominator in order to make them common. So that's what I'm going to multiply by. So when I multiply that side by y minus 2, then I'm going to have to end up foiling this part out before I can add these things together. Again, they have to be in that form in order to add them together. So again, once I've foiled that out, I end up with this part, the y squared minus 4y plus 4. And here my common denominator is the y plus 2 and the y minus 2. Okay, so now let's look at that top part. When I combine like terms, I see that I'd get the y squared. Then I put the positive 1y and the minus 4y together to get minus 3y's. And I put the minus 20 and the positive 4 together to get minus 16. And that's over top of y minus 2 and y plus 2. Oh man, you guys, I see I made a mistake here. Because at the very beginning, it was y squared. So this should have been a y squared brought along. So if you haven't already, maybe stop writing because we need to combine this a little differently. So when you combine them, you should have put the y squared with the y squared, which would have given you 2y squared minus 4y minus 16. Sorry about that, you guys. After this, we'd go through and factor out a 2 from the top. So we're left with y squared minus 2y minus 8 on the top, which actually can be factored even further. Because two numbers that add to get to minus 2 and multiply to get to minus 8 are y minus 4 and y plus 2. Now I notice that my y plus 2's could be divided out. So your final answer here would be 2 times y minus 4 over top of y minus 2. That would be our final simplified answer. Now we're going to try one more here. We're going to also try C. Now C usually makes people freak out a little bit because there's fractions within fractions. Now you guys, this is not too bad. Remember that a fraction just means divide. So what we need to do first is figure out our top part, figure out our bottom part, and then we'll end up dividing our answers just like last day. So for the first side here, think of this 1 as over 1. So I need to multiply them both by an x to get a common denominator here. So I'll end up with x times 1 is x plus 1 divided by x for the first part. The next part here is over 1 again, so I'd also need to multiply by an extra x to get the common denominator to be x. So on this side we have x times x, which is x squared minus 1, and again that's over x. So remember, when you divide, you flip the second fraction and then multiply. So this becomes x plus 1 over x times x over x squared minus 1. And again, it helps us to factor things in order to see our canceling. So I'm going to factor the x squared minus 1 into x plus 1 and x minus 1 since it's a difference of squares. Then I see that what's common is an x that can be divided out and an x plus 1 that can be divided out. So I'm just left with 1 on top because everything was divided, so you're just left with 1, and x minus 1 in the denominator. So this question, again, it's not too bad, but just take it in steps. Figure out your top, figure out your bottom, then do the dividing. And here we've got a little bit bigger textbook assignment because this stuff is a little bit trickier. So please do number 1, and then for numbers 5, 6, and 7, just do A, B, and C, and then 10A and 15A. As always, ask if you have questions, and have a great day, you guys.